Hey everybody, welcome back to Art with Miss Amelia. I've been asked to share a lesson with you about the Statue of Liberty today, and the lesson will involve us making a torn paper portrait together, much like these two down here. And I'll step you through the process in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about what materials you should have gathered for this morning's activity. You're just going to need a couple of sheets of construction paper and a glue stick. That's it. No scissors, no nothing else, just paper and glue stick. Now, you're probably going to want a background color that is either light blue or dark blue, and you can see how that might look. Here's the dark and here's the light. You're also going to need two colors of construction paper, and you can use scraps. You don't need full big sheets. It's not going to take a lot of green actually to make this portrait of Lady Liberty. You might want a dark green and a light green because those are the colors of copper, and the Statue of Liberty is made out of copper, and when copper oxidizes it gets multicolored green, so consider that. I wanted to tell you just briefly about the Statue of Liberty so that you have a frame of reference in case you haven't seen a picture of her before. So let me share my screen and show you some pictures of the Statue of Liberty. The full name of the statue is the Statue of Liberty Enlightening the World, and that's a big mouthful, so most of us shorten it to the Statue of Liberty, and some people have been known to say Lady Liberty too. She lives in the state of New York. She's stood in New York Harbor for 140 years, and she's actually one giant symbol full of symbols, and you might have heard of symbols before. They're really anything that represents something else, something that stands for something else. And usually it's a material object, and it can represent something more abstract. Like you might know that a heart stands for love, right? Sure. So you've got a symbol, a heart, like my hands are right now, that stands for love. Love is the abstract idea. So Lady Liberty, I want you to think about what she might represent. And maybe you guys can discuss in class for a second what she might symbolize here in the United States. I want to get started showing you how to do this project. Now you might notice that the image here isn't made up of straight edges at all. It's all roughly and rugged looking. That's because we're not using scissors today. We're going to use our hands as tools. Oh, by the way, if you want to do clouds, you're going to need a little bit of white paper too. So choose, unless it's been chosen for you, whether you want a light background or dark background. I think for the purposes of my video here, the light one's probably going to show best. We're going to use two colors of green to make our Statue of Liberty today. Now, the biggest part of her is her head. And to make a head, you probably want to start with a rather large piece of paper, not huge, just small. You can tear it. Tearing paper is fun. It has a very satisfactory sound and feel to it when you tear it, right? So to make the head, you kind of want an oval or a round shape, but this piece of paper is square and it has sharp edges. So what I'm going to do is fold my paper in half, because if you look at a face, it's what we know is symmetrical. It's the same on both sides, right? So to make kind of a ovally symmetrical shape that takes up, it'll take up a pretty good size of my paper here. And I'm going to tear across the top and use my fingers, pincher-like, to tear the corner off. So now I've got a scrap over here. Maybe I'll use it later. I don't know. If I open it up, you see it's kind of got a curve to it. It's maybe the side of a face. So let's keep going. We're going to close it back down and keep tearing. I want to make it sort of roundish. So I'm going to curve it and then tear straight. And now let's see. A head, if you look at my face here, it curves down, and then I see a little bit of my neck go straight. So I'm going to curve down by just tearing. I'm pinching between my finger and my thumb, my pointer finger and my thumb, and tearing it down. But I'm not going to tear it all the way across because I want to leave a little bit of a neck there. So if I leave that rounded portion, see if I open it up, you'll see it's kind of roundish now, but I sort of want a neck shape down there too. So I'm going to just tear wherever it goes. Now, when I open it up, that's a little bit round-like. But when I open it, I'm feeling like, oh, it's a little bit too big. That's okay. I can tear off a little bit more. Let me tear off this corner and make it a little narrower because I want to make sure that I have room to put her arm up above her head, right? So I'm going to tear this a little bit more and make her face a little skinnier. I'm just tearing it down like I showed you before, pinching and pulling until I pull off a couple pieces. All right, that's feeling a little bit more size-wise like I was looking for. Yours might be a little smaller than this. It might be a little bigger than that. That's okay. We're not going to glue it yet because we want to make sure we have the shapes that we want for the rest of, like, part of her robes and maybe her crown. So I probably want to pull the head down a little bit so I can see the crown. It might want to go there. But I'm going to point out that I have these lovely little pieces of torn paper now that were scrapped from when I tore the head. But I want to go for a contrasting color. I'm going to go for this green, my next biggest piece of green. Maybe I have ones that look like mine, or maybe you have ones that look smaller. It's kind of about the size of what her body might be already, but it's, again, not rough cut. You know, it's not done. This one was done with scissors when the paper was given to me. But I want strips. I want pieces that are rough because with torn paper art, you're not looking for clean, crisp edges. You're looking for something more rustic. And if you think about it, she's kind of rusty, right? Not exactly. She's corroded because that's what you call it when weathering happens on something that's copper. Rusty would be if it was iron, but she has some iron, but it's on the inside. So here, this piece, I'm just going to tear along the edge to make it look more like a dress shape, because right now it's very chunky and squared off shoulders and stuff, and that looks a little too perfect to me. So I'm just going to tear off a piece along the side. Excuse me. And that's kind of more flowy. And do the same thing to the other side. If you tear a little bit more than you want to, you can always glue it back later. So I tore off that piece. That made it a little more rough. Excuse me. It's feeling a little wide still. I might want to narrow it down and make it so that it has a shape to it. How her robes flow over her body and curve. I don't know if you saw that when I showed you the picture, but she has some curvy bits of fabric folding down. So you can kind of show that with the contrasting color, right? How about her arm sticking up? I probably want to go back to that dark green again. Let me get a bigger piece because her arm sticks up kind of higher than her head. I might need a bigger piece for that. Let's see. I'm going to take my large piece of green and just tear off an edge. And that feels too big for my paper. So I'm going to tear it. Let's see. If she has a torch up on top and it's taller than her head, maybe it'll be about there. So I'll just tear along there and tear this kind of into a shape of an arm. So I'm going to just tear along up. And there's a hand at the top. I might just tear a little bit of a triangle out of the top. So now it looks kind of like a, I don't know, a fork almost. So let's see if I add that on to here. That can be her arm kind of way up top. I might move her head down a little bit. See, this is why we didn't glue it down yet, in case you decide that you want to change your picture around a little bit. So I kind of like that. Now her hand is taller than her head because she's reaching up high, and she might need a torch up there now. So I'm going to get my little scraps more handy. See if any look like they might be the size of a torch. This one's looking torch-like to me already. It has a handle to hold and like a top. Oh, there we go. That's kind of like a torch now. All I did was tear off some little bits to make it a little bit more rough and get rid of that pre-cut edge because, again, we want it to look rustic. And let's see, she's holding it in her hand. I'm realizing I want those to be her fingers and that to be her thumb. So all I had to do was turn it over, right? And now if I put it in her hand, maybe I can even fold the paper so that she's holding it like that. There we go. So now she's got a torch that she's holding up high, and maybe I'll fold the thumb over too. That's the fun thing about paper. Later on, I can glue it down and she's holding the torch. That's kind of cool. I like it. Another thing is that the torch has some little flames. So maybe I want to go back to my contrasting green color now and add some flames for my torch. There we go. There's a flame. So let's see. Now that we've got a head, I'm looking at my dress. It needs a little bit more tearing on it. I think it needs a collar. So I'm going to curve a collar down so that it looks like it has less boxiness from that straight edge cut. That a little better. And it's now a little too long because I moved her head down. So I'm going to tear across the bottom too. Now my dress is pretty well coming together. There we go. She still needs her shoulder over here. There we go. That'll work. And maybe she needs a little bit of an arm going down the other way too. So maybe I'll tuck this piece in as part of an arm. Her other arm. I don't think in my picture we'll be able to see her book that she's holding, but I can still show that this is an arm by making a piece that is arm shaped on that side. Okay, so lengthwise, I think that's about right. I'm just going to tuck it in behind here and it goes off the page, and that's okay. So here's my little swoops of fabric, my two colors of fabric. There's my other piece back. She's starting to come together. Do you see a person developing? We see Lady Liberty. Yep. So I think I need more contrasting colors though, and then I'll work on her face. I'm going to make one more ribbon of foldy fabric to go down here. And I think I need a couple where the arm is, because, you know, where the arm folds, there's some drapey material that comes down her arm. So that might look a little bit more like this, and maybe a little bit like this. So if you get a couple of curves torn out, there we go. Now her arm is up. Maybe there's a little fold over here too where her arm is holding the book. So I'm just going to get a little bit of fold going over there too. And that'll show a little contrast right here where the sleeve goes down. Think about her hair. It kind of flows down over her. There's like ringlets and stuff. But I have a light green for the head. So I'm going to go for a contrasting color and do some strips. Maybe you want to twirl them a little bit so that they look curly. I don't know. But you can make all kinds of hair pieces go over her head. I need the top of her head too, because there's something on the top of her head. What does she have on the top of her head that we don't want to forget to include? What did you see spiking out of the top of her head? A crown. So she has a crown that we need to do here too. And the crown, I'll tell you about that symbol right now. The crown symbolizes something, and there are 7 spikes on her head. So if you count them, let me see if I can share screen again really fast and show you. Share screen. share. You can count them. She has 7 spikes up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And on the crown, see all those dark areas? Those are actually windows. If you go there, you can go up some staircases inside of her, some spiral staircases, all the way up to her head and look out the window. It's really tiny windows, but it's fun to be able to see out of her head. That's kind of an interesting idea. But anyway, those 7 spikes on her head, the crown, represent the 7 oceans and the 7 continents of the world, and the universal idea of liberty. So it's not just a fashion statement or royalty in this case. It has something to do with the rest of the world and being a symbol of liberty, not just for the United States, but for everyone around the world. So I'm going to speed things up here, and you can pause the video here if you want, but add a bunch of hair. You can make sure you use tear strips and make it look rough and blowy in the wind, just like in New York Harbor where the wind blows pretty much every day. But again, we'll glue this all down in a minute. But how many spikes did I need up on top of her head? I think now that I have dark green for the hair, I'm going to go light green for the spikes. So I'm just going to sort of make somewhat triangular shapes, right? So there's 1 spike. And you're going to go ahead and tear 7 spikes, just like that. Roughly triangular shape. You can make them bigger and smaller to show that some are closer up and some are further away. Whatever works for you. 7 spikes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To get it to look more like a face, you can just tear sort of an ovally shape for an eye. You can do an ovally shape on the other side too. Maybe that's an eyebrow. I don't know. That one's a little thick. I'm going to try again. Let's go for that. I think that's more eye shaped. So now I've got 2 eyes. If I wanted to get even smaller, I could get a little piece of light green and make a pupil in each eye. You can do as many details as you want. I want you to spend time practicing tearing and trying different things. And then when you're happy with your composition, in art we talk about compositions, that's putting the pieces together in a way that looks aesthetically pleasing. Those are big fancy words, but aesthetics is our ideas of beauty, right? And I think she needs a nose. There's a nose and maybe a mouth. Once you have the pieces the way you like them, you can start gluing them down. And I recommend doing from the back to the front. So what I'm going to do is just move my pieces slightly out of the way. And I'm going to start with the back piece first. I want to put the head glued down, right? So I'm just going to flip it over in the spot where I liked having it. I'm going to put some glue all over the back and then flip it over and stick it in place. So that was about where I wanted the head. And then I'm going to stick those eyes back on the, actually, no, I'm going to do the dress next. We'll do smallest details last. So I'm moving the pieces out of my way for a moment so I can glue the big dress piece next. So you kind of move from back to front, largest to smallest. That's your best bet when constructing your torn pieces of paper the way you want it to be. So I'm going to put that right there. It's one part of her dress. Now I want to put that shoulder piece on so that it kind of overlaps a little bit. I'm going to put it that way. And then remember that arm we wanted to attach down at the side. It's going to go off the page. That's okay. I'll just tear it off right there. Let's put that on. There's her arm. Oh, it still shows. I'll put that piece back on. So even if you tear a piece off that you didn't want to tear off, that's okay. You can glue it back on. And there. Now the arm kind of goes off the page. And as I tear the little bits and pieces off, it starts to look rougher. And that's kind of neat how it has this layering effect. And I think I had, where did it go? There it is. I had a little piece of light green that I wanted to add where her shoulder fabric folds a little bit. And I wanted to add on the drapes of cloth in that lighter color of green. It's curving too much. I'm going to attach that to that one and then attach this one to this one so that it drapes more gently. So you get to make choices all along the way about how you want to add each little piece of paper, okay? And let's put this one there. I'm liking that. That feels good to me. If I don't like where I set it down, the glue doesn't dry right away, so you have a chance to alter it if you're not as happy with how it's looking at a particular moment. There we go. And I'll do a we'll do a little time lapse so you see it come together, okay? A symbol is a physical object or drawing that stands for or represents an idea or something else. While we work, let's touch back on the symbolism of Lady Liberty. We did speak of friendship being symbolized by the statue, since France gave the statue to the US as a kind of 100th birthday present. We also touched on the idea of freedom. In her left hand is the tabula annasta with the date July 4th, 1776. That's when the colonies declared independence from England. This date identifies the figure as representing freedom, law, and justice. And another kind of freedom is represented by the broken shackles at her right foot and her right foot taking a step forward, symbolizing moving into the future freely. About the time of the gift from France to the United States is when the abolition of slavery was taking place in America. Another freedom connection is that the statue resembles the Roman goddess Libertà, who was worshipped in the ancient Rome as the goddess of freedom, especially among emancipated slaves. She also symbolizes openness and welcoming because she's positioned in New York Harbor. She was one of the first things many generations of new immigrants saw when arriving by ship. And up at the top, the torch and light can be thought of as knowledge, which is another kind of freedom, the freedom of thought. And the crown with its 7 points, like we were talking about before, represent the 7 oceans and the 7 continents of the world, or the universal concept of liberty. It's not just a fashion statement to have that crown. So here's a fun fact. Did you know that the statue is 151 feet high and 35 feet across? If you think about that in shoe sizes, her shoe would be a size 879. That's a really big person, isn't it? Also, another fun fact, did you know that since she's the tallest thing out in the harbor, it is believed that she's been struck by lightning 600 times or more. That's a lot. Well, that's all the facts I had for you for today. And with that, so now that we've finished, I thought I'd show you too. It doesn't matter how many times I do this project with classes, every time comes out differently. It's kind of interesting. You can do the same, in art, you can do the same topic over and over and over again, and every time it turns out differently. You might have ones that you like better than others. You might have ones that you think are unfinished. You can go back and add things to later. Just remember that your art is always a process and always keeps going. And every time you do the same theme over and over again, you actually get better at it and you learn something new and you try something new. So I encourage you to think about how you enjoyed your process today. Think about using your fingers instead of scissors sometimes, and think about trying something once and then maybe trying it again to see how it comes out differently. Anyhow, that's it from Art with Miss Amelia today, and I look forward to seeing yours in the classroom when you're all done. And in the meantime, keep on creating, everybody. Take care. Bye.